Hello, everyone, and welcome to our session, What's Our Cash? How Treasury Teams Are Advancing Forecasting and Automation. I'm Emily Flagg with the Treasury 4 Marketing Team, and I'll be your moderator today. We're so excited to have you with us. This session is being recorded live. We'll go ahead and send the recording after this webinar as well. So to introduce our speakers, we have Randy DeVita, our VP of Customer Success at Treasury 4. And then we have Mehul Rupani. He's the Director of Treasury at OneTrust. And then we have Cooper Strout, our lead data architect at Treasury 4. To go ahead and get started, we're going to go ahead and start with a poll question. Just give me one moment to launch that. So go ahead and answer that as soon as you can. And then I'm going to hand it off to our lovely, lovely speakers now to speak on that, and I'll go ahead and reshare the slide.
Thanks very much, Emily. And thanks everybody for making time to join us today. Really glad to have a chance to talk to some of our customers, prospects, with one of our customers, Mehul, and one of our MVPs at Treasury 4, Cooper. So thanks for making time. I know the poll question, it's generally a little loaded. Like, how would you describe your current cash forecasting process? So yeah, I see oh, cool. That's cool. Yeah. So no big surprises. I would like to talk to the one person who is fully automated and integrated. That's brilliant. But I feel like that is definitely consistent with where we're all sort of on a path to get to. A lot of manual work in terms of spreadsheets and emails and other, maybe some of it is partially automated, but in an ideal state, having things as automated as possible. And we'll talk a little bit about, or hear a little bit why that's been important for our customers and for Mehul. Maybe we just jump ahead, Emily, to the next slide and talk a little bit about from what we see in terms of when we talk to customers and prospects about how they're forecasting. That the challenges we hear are probably implicit in sort of how people answered the poll question. The challenges are just a lot of manual process, a lot of Excel, copy, paste, emails, downloads from banking portals. So just trying to collect, get all of that stuff, and it's a manual process to collect all that information. But even in collecting the information, it seems like it lives in a lot of different places. The data is scattered. So there's data that is coming from banks. There's data that is coming from investment portals. There's data that is coming from emails, from FP&A, from ERPs. So the data is, it's a pejorative term, but the data is scattered. So it's a lot of effort to try to collect that information. And then it seems like the challenge is, by the time you get through all that stuff, the data is maybe a little stale. The reporting is slow. The reporting is, you collect the information, leadership is looking for insight to what do we predict is going to happen, or if something happens, what do we predict is going to happen, and the reporting is manual as well. I'll stop there for a moment, just from your point of view. Does any one of these things resonate the most from your point of view in terms of the journey you've been on, both at OneTrust, but also you've been with a number of organizations as well, and this is probably a top of mind problem.
No, yeah, I definitely agree, right? So I think you hit it right on the head, right? I think a lot of data just lives everywhere across the company, right? So like our AR team, they may have their own forecast. It's like our payroll team, which is a little bit more easier to forecast. And then there's also like your AP payments, right? So how do we actually like digest that data? So I think some of the challenges that we had early on was basically, how do we get the data in a way that's digestible for us, and then how we can incorporate that within our forecast. So yeah, like I definitely agree with some of those challenges right there. But for us, I think it's definitely a journey, and we're definitely trying to find ways to centralize some of that data, just all within one system.
Yeah, no, it's a good way to frame it too. I think that's been consistent. There's no panacea. It feels like it's an
Yeah.
evolution, right? It's a leveraging of technologies, a leveraging of process, but it seems like it's you solve for one problem and then you have the next challenge to sort
Yeah.
of get through. So yeah, Emily, could you jump ahead to the next slide, and maybe we could just talk through at a high level from our point of view. There's sort of four pillars of things that we're focusing on improving for our customers. One is this idea of trying to have and to get to to answer the question, how do you forecast some of the challenges that we want to solve for is real time integration from banking data, investment data, even ERP data where it's possible. So just having that data as real time solve for the problem of automating integrations is sort of like one challenge, but it's not, I think, the only challenge that we see with customers. Is another is just this idea of, well, now that you've automated the data that you've gotten from the bank, how do you truly enrich the data in a way so that it is maybe consistent across your entities, consistent across the banks? How do you get it to tell a story for your organization as opposed to each of the banks? So just this idea of having transaction enrichment so that you put a business definition around the all the activity that you're integrating in an automated way is another challenge to deal with. Third is, even if you've managed to automate the integrations and enrich the data, is how can you have the flexibility to sort of use your forecast to get predictions, to use your own forecasts to be able to see all that information in one place, and then and even see it in the way that you want to see it. If there's scenarios, if there's different ways that you want to sort of predict forecast, how do you have the flexibility to choose your own models? And then last, I would say, and definitely a big part of the journey, Cooper and Miho, that you guys have been on and working through this at OneTrust, is this idea of having reporting that is flexible enough to give you insight so that once you move past automation and enrichment and even configuring the forecast the way you would like to see it, how can you get the insight that you want to sort of get to? Anything you would add to that, Miho, from your point of view, or anything that maybe was harder or more important for you?
Yeah, I think for us is basically just having one central view of our number one, it's our cash balances, and then also just it also comes to various metrics, right? So how much are we actually collecting from customers? I guess what currency are we collecting from? And then just basically just using all that data to make just an informed decision on our cash balances, right?
Yep.
So for us it's always about just I think overall just reporting and then also visibility to senior management, right? Because I think what I was taught early on is that we should be able to provide just an answer to senior management just right away, right? So, for example, if there's a question about, in terms of how much specific euros do we have, right? I don't want to have to, spend time, gathering all the different accounts that we have in euros and then summing it together and then providing to senior management, right? So just basically just having one maybe centralized system, which is currently T4, that that at least that shows us, okay, we have GBP here, we have euros here, and we have dollars here, and then from there we can make informed decisions on whether right to harvest some of that foreign currency and then
Mm-hmm.
convert it back, and then even for investments, right? So how much is currently set in, I guess, within our investment account, and what's our yield, right?
Yep.
And then from there, as we can pass that information on to senior management, there's an M&A transaction or so forth, they can make that decision there too as well, right? So for us, it's always just about making sure that we have centralized data, and making sure that data is actually correct. So again, I would definitely say I think reporting side is definitely really, really important for us.
Yeah, it's a good way to frame it too. I think it's been for us as an organization, Treasury4, as we've evolved and grown and worked with customers. One of the biggest areas of sort of impact has been just on the reporting side. We definitely want to automate integrating the data. We want to enrich the data, but customers
Yeah.
frequently want to use the data. And what I've heard from more than one customer is, I want to use reports to be able to answer the questions I get, and as soon as I answer the
Yeah.
question, they give me another question. They have another question, but it's having a reporting tool that's flexible enough that you can sort of do that work is sort of the ideal state.
Correct. Yeah. And then also, it's like I would also just add to as well, just like the dissemination of data, right? It's like we don't want to, for us, it's we all obviously want to strive towards automation, right? Correct. Like, I think I think the last thing I think I want to do is like go into a system and then download a report and then copy and paste it into an email, right? I think what we want to eventually get to is just to auto push reports, right? So maybe
Yep.
every single Monday or every single day that there's a report that goes out, it's like your controllership or I guess your treasurer, tax, I think your CFO that says, okay, here's the cash balances, here's the commentary, um,
Mm.
right? So that's eventually, I think the goal that we want to get to, and I think we've really made, I think, really great progress with some of I think the features that T4 rolled out.
Yeah, it's we've done a lot of good work. We have plenty
Yeah,
of stuff to do, right? So it's
yeah,
fun.
of course.
And maybe that's a good way to maybe segue. And Emily, if you could maybe advance to slide one, and we bring Cooper into this, and maybe Cooper, you could lead us a little bit and talk through. And Mehul, this is sort of an overview running in the
Yeah,
background of the sort of report that you're using for forecasting. Maybe just talk us through that,
yeah,
Cooper, a little bit. And Mehul, feel free to jump in. And
yeah,
yeah.
Yeah. So I think one of the things we've highlighted here is that just how iterative reporting needs to be. So you do all the work like maintaining your database and organizing it, but really at the end of the day, what you really need to be able to do is to have access to the data. And what Mehul and Randy were saying earlier, where it's like you answer one question, but then immediately another question follows, is definitely where reporting shines because it's all iterative. And this particular report that we're showing here, this was built, we basically built it with Mehul and team. And just like as feedback came up, like in real time, we'd be like, okay, let's go and drag this over here, move this, let's add a new tab. What questions do you have? And so we were just working with them to build that. And I just don't think there's any other way that you can realistically do this at scale and do it effectively, other than just like hammering through it and building it. And so it's one thing to say like, yeah, okay, I can do that. But really at the end of the day, every report itself is just a pivot table. And even like the line charts, all the cool stuff, I mean, it's all just pivot tables at the end of the day. So it's not only like, okay, people at Treasury 4 can build this stuff, but it's just a matter of like, everybody can do it. And I can say that with confidence because that is what's actually happening among all of our customers. So it's having access to your data, the amount of stuff that you can accomplish with that time that you previously might have spent bringing in more data, reorganizing it. I mean, the fact that you have access to your data, you can actually spend the time understanding what's going on and then not only looking at the past, but then looking forward, like what's going to happen and then track your performance over time, which is what this report does quite well.
yeah.
And
No,
you probably recognize some of this stuff here, Mehul, right? I mean,
it's so for us, so we had this same exact format within Excel, right? And obviously, I think Excel has been great to us over the last, whatever, maybe it's like 10 years or something. But I eventually think you want to get to a much more scalable format, right? So we worked with T4 on so we had the format that we wanted and then we built it directly within the system because previously what we were doing is we were like literally going into T4. So we were copying the actuals, from T4 into the spreadsheet and then calculating your forecast, right? Which is obviously, it's very, very silly, right? So I think with having the actuals now within T4, then having your forecast built off those historicals, just saves so much time, right? And obviously just eliminates a lot of, the fat fingers and formula issues and so forth. And then I think the variance analysis has obviously, I think, greatly improved too as well, right? I mean, so we were manually calculating the variances, which was, I think, fine I think for the beginning, but eventually, so you want something that's a little bit more scalable. And I think Cooper has done a great job here, right? So I think the format that you see here is effectively just using like the direct cash flow method, which in Treasury, in my opinion, I think is the easiest way to look at our cash. And it's for us, it's like you really don't want to kind of reinvent the wheel. I mean, if something works really well and if it gives us what we need, let's continue to innovate on that. And I think that's what we've done.
and I think the report itself that it's sort of running here in the background, but it's really leverage the investment of time it seems that you and the team at OneTrust had made in terms of how do you want to tag and enrich the data that you have
Yeah.
automated from the banks, right? So that was done, and that was an investment of planning. But now that you have it, then the question was, well, how do you want to forecast?
Yeah.
And a report like this, it was to Cooper's point, definitely iterative in that we were producing predictions for you. So we will predict based on what's happened in the past for these categories. What do we predict is going to happen
Yeah.
using machine learning? And the feedback had been like, well, we don't always want to use machine learning. Sometimes we want to use a moving average. And so we
Yeah.
enhanced it a little bit to say, okay, what sort of model can you use? But then what we heard from you and from other customers as well was, well, it's great that you're predicting what is going to happen, but in some cases, we want to forecast what's going to happen for some strips of payments, or sorry, I say some strips of transactions, and really synthesize it. Can you show me what's actually happened versus what you predict is going to happen using a model versus what
Yeah.
I forecast was going to happen? So none of that happened on day two, but it was definitely a really iterative process of sort of building something like this out. That gets to some of these insights, right? So then that was sort of the next question is like, okay, now that to some degree that has been solved in terms of automated enrichment and presenting the data, what would you do with it now that that you have it? And this is where we started to get into KPIs and tracking variances and things like that in the forecast report.
Yep.
Cooper, can you maybe just talk through a little bit from your point of view, like I guess the just talking through maybe some of the settings, how you see users interacting with this report, versions of this report. How do they get their own forecasts into the report? Like basically, I guess
Yeah.
from your point of view, you're not only a data designer, but you're trying to find ways to facilitate having customers interact with data.
Yeah. Yeah. So it's a good point, but I think even if you have access to your data, there's still going to be times where you will want to test certain scenarios. What happens to my projected balances if this transaction occurs in this period, or what about this period? How does it affect my goals? But for this particular report, I believe I can't remember the exact timestamp of it, but what you've seen is that in that enter forecast button on the top right, the green one, this report actually has the ability for you can actually put in adjust the forecasts manually without ever leaving the report, and that's just a feature of Sigma that we've turned on. But so even if you have access to your data, there still will be times where it's like, yeah, you need to export it. But with those input tables, is what they're called. You don't have to actually leave because you can just plug in those manual inputs there and then update it, and then it's ready to go. Yeah. Along with that, the settings bit, I mean, it's still an input table at its core, but it's just saying, hey, for this cash flow type, I want to use machine learning, or for this other one, I want to use our projected transactions, or other ones might be a rolling average. Some of them I just like, yeah, I want to be able to toggle between the machine learning, but if I do put in a manual adjustment, use that and override it or adjust it. So it's like the amount of configuration you can do for this particular report is pretty vast. But I mean, this is just one of many forecast reports that we currently have. And if I were to describe my job, it is honestly a lot of talking about forecasts and cash positioning. And so they're both forward looking, but the amount of reports that are basically accumulating in the way that I would describe it is like a library of reports. They're all kind of built the same way. They're just kind of modified and tweaked a little differently to meet the needs of the customer. So, yeah, right. I think that hopefully answers your question, but it's just all about your data and being able to tweak and modify without having to worry about like, oh, geez, like what is this going to break if I change this number or add this forecasted transaction? You just want the ability to like, without leaving, without any fear as to what is going to happen. You just want to be able to plug in a number and see the impact of it. In this case, it might be balances. So,
yeah, I think the reporting. Thanks, Cooper. The reporting tool and the collaboration with Mehul and other customers is sort of allows us to sort of evolve something so that, a report like this is designed to be, certainly can be configured, as Mehul knows, but it's also
Yeah.
designed where you can interact with it and say, hey, I'd actually like to see these. I'd like to see these forecasts in USD, my base currency, or I want to see it in the functional currency of my entity. That just becomes a way of interacting with a report without having any, again, getting back to like avoiding all the manual stuff, just
Right.
toggling the buttons and being able to sort of interact with a report was kind of a crucial piece.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think just to add, right, so I think at least for OneTrust being a much smaller company, right, so we understand our cash flows are a little bit more sporadic, right, so just kind of leveraging some of like the AR or machine learning tools may need to adjust for that, right, and like, for example, if the machine learning isn't going to forecast an M&A transaction for us, right,
Yep.
or just a one-time large inflow or outflow, so having that, I think that flexibility to, I think toggle in between I think machine learning and I think some of your manual inputs. I think just adds just another layer of I think overall flexibility. And I think you're able to just I think analyze the data just a little bit more clearly.
Yeah, and I was helpful too because I even noticed as it was going through that there's even fields in the system, not just in the report, but in the system that were feedback from you
Yeah,
guys, where it was kind
yeah,
of like, hey, these forecasts or this transaction, I don't want to see it represent or impact my forecast. I want to flag it as being something to exclude from a forecast. It shouldn't be part of
yeah.
the machine learning analysis. So yeah, it's nice to be able to see sort of the updates to the platform as we've kind of gone through the process. Emily, can you actually, be and maybe if you could just jump ahead us, I think a slide, and maybe it'd be good, just to kind of ask you a little bit about, setting the stage for, challenges of forecasting and sort of ways to sort of attack it, and even just the tool and ways to present it in the report. Again, it's been a process for you and for the team
Yeah.
there at OneTrust. I mean, can you walk us through, I guess, just specific to OneTrust and your team, what the forecasting process looks like, and like where is the data coming from? Maybe who's looking at it? What does that look like for you guys?
Yeah. Yeah, of course. Yeah. So I think just to preface, right? I mean, so when I first joined OneTrust, we didn't have a cash flow forecast that was really useful to us, right? I mean, obviously with FP&A, it's like they have their own forecast, but they use a different method, right? They use the indirect method, whereas for treasuries, we care about cash inflows, cash outflows in the starting as well as ending balances, right? So that was the first step, right? So I think the first step we did was obviously just to create just entity level forecast across our uh, subs, and then we
Hmm.
created a region consolidated forecast, and then we did one fully consolidated
Yeah.
forecast. Right? So I
Yep.
think it may seem kind of an overkill, but for us, I think it was what I think we really needed at the time, and I think it's also important to have different views of the cash. I think just depending on, I guess, who you're sending the report to, right? And then I think number two is I think cleaning up the data, right? It's like obviously I think when we first started to use T4, so we didn't have correct mapping rules in place, right? So transactions were everywhere, right? So I think for number two is we really had to put the investment in to make sure that the data was clean because your forecast is only going to be as accurate as the data that you feed it. So
Hmm.
we really had to invest that time there with you guys to do that. And then now we're really trying to, obviously strive, I think, towards automation, right? I think what you just showed to us is currently, it's currently the work in progress, right? And I think we want to continue just to automate that and to continue just to innovate on that too as well, right? And I think we talked about, some automating some of like the push reporting.
Hmm.
I think also playing around with some of the machine learning, AI tools, and so forth. So it's definitely just like it's been a journey. But again, I think you just have to, I think, remember where you started from and just look at where you want to go. So you know,
Is it from your point of view? Because I know it's been great working with you and the team at OneTrust. You've been there for, I think, getting close to maybe 2 years now,
years,
right?
yeah, yep,
But I mean, you've come from other organizations previous to
yeah.
that. So I just wonder, like, from your point of view, are the challenges that you sort of found as it relates to forecasting at OneTrust particularly unique from what you'd seen elsewhere, and what have you seen?
Yeah.
Uh,
I mean,
out?
I think obviously I think technology has evolved over the years,
Yeah.
right? So my prior stops were, I think prior to this whole AI boom, I would say, or I think the technology boom.
Mm,
I think prior companies were obviously leveraging like your Excel models, right? They were using
yeah.
their ERPs, they were using their TMS at the time. But for us, it's like OneTrust is it's probably the smallest company that I've worked at so far. So it's a little bit more manageable in terms of forecasting. I think prior companies have obviously, I think they have leveraged automated dashboards, right? So whether it's through Tableau or it's even their own TMS, but they all started with a solid foundation, right? So, right. So whether it's mapping rules, whether it's basic integrations with their banks, and again, I say having clean data is the key. If you have bad data, so your forecasting reporting will be off. And then also just having really great, just cross-functional relationships with your internal stakeholders, right? So your AP, your AR, your tax, and your payroll schemes are very important. And making sure that you're all just striving towards a similar goal with respect to, it's clean data gathering that's automated and that's scalable.
No, it's perfect. It's
Yeah.
perfect. And I wonder if you, well, I think you alluded to this a little bit, and maybe before
Yeah.
I see some questions, but we asked for some questions. The- we've talked about where we are now, the progress we've made, the challenges you've had, but definitely the objective is to find more problems. So I mean, where like with as where do you see the focus being next in
Yeah.
terms of like initiatives as it relates to forecasting and automation at OneTrust for you guys?
Yeah, it's again, I think it just continues to automate where we can, right? I think obviously just kind of leverage some of the machine learning, just features of T4, and I think I think just in general trying to strive for just kind of a less manual effort with respect to forecasting. I think there's clearly a thing that I think there's work that needs to be done on that front with respect to machine learning and AI. I think just in general, and I think just being a smaller company, I think we understand like our cash flows are going to be a little bit more just crazy and a little bit more sporadic. So maybe technology may not help there just immediately with respect to AI and machine learning. Something we need to be. I think we need to be realistic of that and just be conscious of that. I think we've been playing around with machine learning on our AP and payroll line item just because that, I think these transactions are a little bit more just recurring and a little bit more easily to be forecastable. And then also, I think we all was also just want to continue just to automate the dissemination of the reports to our
Yeah.
management, right?
Yep.
So again, it's rather than downloading an email and reports, we want to find ways to just make sure that I think they have that data right when they log into the morning, right? So that's I think the ultimate goal there.
No, we hear that's. I think it's similar to what we hear. I think the reporting is certainly progressive, but it's not everybody in an organization wants to have to log into a solution and sort of navigate to find a report and configure it. So they just kind of want to get the data. So just trying to have ways, and definitely the reporting we have is stuff that we're able to push out to non-users, right? And I think that's a big help. Um,
Yep.
Great. I see a couple of questions, and maybe we're just in the interest of time, Emily. Maybe we can sort of shift it to Q&A and where people have some questions. I see. I'll jump into
Mm.
one that I see uh, uh, relative to, is the solution relatively ERP agnostic? The short answer is yes. So I think the implication is, can we get the forecasts don't have to come from Treasury 4. They, like we're generating predictions, but definitely customers are able to import forecasts from an ERP solution. And the way we sort of frame our transactions in our system is we definitely have things that we call reported items that came in from the bank. We complicate it by calling things projected items, things that we know are going to happen. So that would be like an example of like a payment or a debt settlement, the coupon settlement that's going to happen on a certain date in the future. And then we integrate forecasts as well from ERP systems where we're agnostic to not just the platform, but just the layout. We just have which it doesn't even have to be at the account level in terms of the forecast, just at any level. We integrate those forecasts into the system. And they can be synthesized with um, and bumped up against what is actually happening versus what is predicted to happen, and compare what actually happened, right? To some sort of statistical variance analysis. Other questions, just sort of scanning the chat here. Sorry, a difficult one for algorithms. What algorithms are used for the machine learning? The technical term is I don't know exactly. There is a proprietary model that our analysts sort of built out. It is something that we're evolving as we go too. So it's designed. We've designed it to be proprietary so that we can adjust the inputs and the weights of it. We can follow up. I think we've got some white papers to support it, but it's something that we've programmed in house. It's not something that we've outsourced. But maybe even Cooper, you can talk a little bit about how you've seen others leveraging forecasting.
Yeah,
models.
the machine learning model specifically that we built it on is a neural network. That answers your question. But yeah, we have other people who are building out forecasts using their own internal AI tool or AI chat tool, and they're just plugging in the data and then being like, "Hey, generate the forecast with this type of trend," and then I'm going to analyze it. Then they just take it, load it into the system. It kind of ranges all over the place. Everybody basically wants to do forecasting like a little bit different. So that's just what I've seen so far.
Yeah, and I think it's still for us evolving in that we want to give the feedback that we've heard from customers is they want flexibility to not just how they're going to do the forecast, but what models they want to use to do the forecasting. So definitely something that we're trying to sort of allow to be agnostic in terms of the models that the customers use. I've seen some pretty innovative stuff in terms of the models customers are using to do the predictions. Yeah.
I think the most important thing about it is less of like how is it done and more of is it accurate. And I think that what I've seen at least is how when people say, yeah, okay, I can build forecasts, but with all the time I have to do to get the data, like spin it up, transform it, modify it. By the time, at the end of the day, I don't have enough time to like track and see what method is the best. And I think that with you, when you have access to the data and you're iterating on how you're presenting the data, that's when you can really spend the time to say, hey, what is actually performing the best? And so when that gets into more of versioning and tracking the different outputs of the different models, then you can actually see how it's performed over time. I think that's the biggest question that should be asked. And that's what this particular report actually answers.
Perfect. Other questions that I see, one I see is I assume is relative to where like the source of the forecast. Is there a debt module? We Treasury 4 are releasing a debt and also an FX module in beta this week, and it will be in production next month. We do monthly cycles of releases. So we're just releasing that functionality. A big part of it was not just for trade capture for customers and from prospects, is just the ability to get the forecast from other sources besides just manual input. So just having the cash flow schedules in a forecast is helpful. So back to the point of how do you forecast, where do you get it? It's going to be invariably manual. Many places you can pull it from. So debt and FX is something that we'll support before the year is out. Cool. Other questions that I see? Maybe I'll ask a question of you, Mehul. I know as we're kind of going through some of these, but I'm seeing you again for the first time since Boston at AFP.
Yeah.
And so I wonder. I know it's not just a big party, but there's a lot to see and do there. I mean, from your point of view, like what did you see as it relates to forecasting that you found particularly interesting? What were other, I guess, practitioners talking about in sessions that seemed
Yeah. Yeah, of course. Yeah. I mean, obviously, I think the big theme is just AI, right? I think the big theme is, how do you leverage AI and automation and forecasting? And I think I think the companies, or at least the speakers that at least kind of alluded to, is that like I think we're all in this together, right? It's if they all,
Mm.
it's if we all have the same problems right now, which is very, very manual work, right? And
Yeah.
I think I think the goal is to get to just a maybe fully automated cash flow forecast, but they also have been realistic. It's like it's going to take time to get there. And I think leveraging, some of like the AI tools now, like for example, like ChatGPT or it's even Copilot, right? But then again, so how do you integrate that with your ERP, or how do you integrate that with, uh, some of like the TMSs, right? Because for example, I think there was like I think an example of where a company was, I think, using ChatGPT to ask a question, and then I guess they would automatically pull, I think, that data from, I believe, their TMS, or I think even their ERP, right? So it's
Mm.
like, for example, let's say, what is like my free cash flow for last quarter, right? So it's like there's like smaller use cases there, but then again, I think the whole focus is, how can we continue to just automate our cash flow forecasting? And I think the simple answer to that was that, so we're not fully there yet with like some of the AI and automation tools currently there out there, and just because of, right? So I mean, maybe it's for security reasons or even privacy
Yeah.
reasons, right? So there's just a lot, I think, just to consider there. But I know a lot of people are very, very excited about at least the prospect of using AI machine learning to fully automate their forecast.
Yeah, and it hasn't changed in all the time that I've been working with customers. It seems in that treasury professionals are almost invariably asked, even with technology, to do more with less. So
Yeah.
it's how finding ways to sort of automate, but still sort of find ways to give the answers and insight.
Yeah.
I see one of the questions is, and feel free to talk about it as much as you can, but how is ERP data being fed into Treasury for you at OneTrust?
Yeah. So right. I think the short answer to that is no, right? I mean, and like for example, because I mean, we don't really see like a huge use case for us personally right now, just because some like the banking transactions are already are within ERP, but then they're also within T4, right? So like
Hmm.
we haven't really personally have found like a huge use case for it.
Hmm.
But if there are, please email me, please message me, and it's happy to chat about that.
Yeah.
I have a use case. So I basically run Treasury 4's own instance of Treasury 4. And one of the issues that I consistently have is where the banks don't give enough detail to properly organize it. And so what I do, or have been building out on my end, is creating an AI agent that is looking at NetSuite data that I pulled into our Snowflake instance. And it's looking at the content there and then looking at the journal entry lines and invoice information and saying, hey, go look back at the transactions from the bank. If it's not categorized, then like either add more information to that transaction in our system or propose a categorization for it. And that's more of like, I'm just trying it out to see how that helps things.
Hmm.
But I think that's more so like the vision of where this stuff is going as it relates to ERP data. It's just supplementing, your bank data. And what we do, I think there's another question here on the generative AI as well. And I guess I'll address that here. But we also have an agent that runs in the system that is checking your uncategorized transactions, and it's looking at that information from the bank to say, hey, okay, these keywords show up this number of times. We know that typically means X, so it's going to be an accounts payable. Might even recommend the subtypes or even down to the GL. So that's just a use case there. But in my case, it's like if the bank doesn't provide the detail, I want to go look at the other system where the accountants have put in that information and say, hey, this transaction is this much.
Let's see if Emily can create an emoji of my head blowing up there. That's pretty. That's really progressive, and it's cool, and it's really interesting. I mean, to Mehul's point, it is something that wasn't there. Basically that we were contemplating. At the start of the year to some degree, right? It's just we have technology. What can we do with it? Challenges are in some cases the bank reporting is thin. Let's go to the ERP system and see if we can leverage that to help us enrich the data. So yeah, it's really great. Really great idea. Maybe Emily, I think we've hit most of the questions. Maybe we would look to wrap up. And I guess I would just say, number one, thanks everybody for making time to join us today. But certainly, thanks very much to Mehul and Cooper for joining us and talking through how to do forecasting using Treasury for. Emily, thanks very much to you and Christina for your help kind of coordinating the webinar.
Yeah, thank you all.
Yeah, of course. Thank you. And that wraps up our What's Our Cash session. A huge thank you to Mehul, Cooper, and Randy, and to everyone who joined us live. If you'd like to continue the conversation or see any of our new events coming up, please go ahead and visit treasury4.com or go ahead and scan the QR code. And thank you again for joining us. And we'll see you at the next session. I'll be sure to send the recording out shortly. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks.